Chapter 102. Hold My Hand. Gojo lay quietly with his head cradled in Geto's lap. Geto leaned against the wall, eyes closed, stroking Gojo's hair gently to soothe him. It wasn't until Gojo's breathing slowed and his head tilted to the side, and he was fast asleep, that Geto let himself drift off, fingers entwined in Gojo's white tufts. A few hours into the night, Gojo woke and reached for Geto, pulling him down to the bed. "Suguru, I need you," Gojo whispered, nestling himself on top of Geto. The front of his bathrobe gaped open as he straddled him. He rested on his forearms, waiting for an answer. Geto slipped his pajama bottoms off as a reply. He wrapped his arms around Gojo, fingertips digging into the soft fabric of his robe. Gojo delicately made love to Geto, stroking his cheek with his thumb and kissing him tenderly. Geto echoed back the softness, caressing the back of Gojo's neck, running his palms lightly across his back. Gojo's panting was a whisper in his ear, and even when he came, he pressed himself deeper into Geto so gently, he was beginning to feel fragile. But it was Gojo who was feeling fragile, wanting Geto to cradle him to sleep afterwards. Geto held him tight and kissed him on the forehead, like Gojo had done to him countless times before. The next morning, they dressed for school in silence. The lingering traces of Gojo's disturbed energy turned into something calmer, but cautious. They were ready early, so Geto sat at the edge of their bed, Gojo at his feet, clutching Choco Cat, chin resting on top of its head. Geto massaged Gojo's neck and rubbed the remaining tension out of his shoulders. He let himself wonder what had disturbed Gojo. It felt like an open wound he didn't want to poke if he wasn't ready to talk about it. Gojo leaned on the bed, tipping his head back to look at Geto. A lopsided grin started to form on his lips. "I can see up your nostrils," Gojo declared as Geto looked down at him. Geto couldn't help but laugh. "Okay, I think you're ready to go to class now," he said, smacking Gojo lightly on the arm. "Boo," Gojo pouted. He stood up and placed Choco Cat on the bed, then pulled Geto up. They walked to school, shivering even underneath their heavy coats. It was an unusually frigid day. Geto pulled on his leather gloves, a gift from Gojo. He'd rather have been able to hold his hand for warmth, but the gloves were good enough for now. Gojo spotted the gloves and grinned. He wished he could reach out and warm his hands with his own instead, but he was glad Geto remembered to bring them. When they settled at their desk, Gojo discreetly squeezed Geto's knee. Geto looked over and smiled. During study period, Yaga leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed and glanced at the two of them, curious as ever. Gojo was becoming increasingly careless. If anyone looked, they'd see him pressing his thigh into Geto's as they leafed through their textbooks. If anyone was familiar with the feel of Geto's energy, they would sense it being blanketed by a soft cover of Gojo's. During their training session, Yaga didn't tell Geto that the bee in the cage wasn't the same one they worked with before. It was a higher grade curse, and while it was still wrapped in the talisman, Gojo walked by without detecting the change. He sat on the tatami mats, turning off infinity without being prompted, and closed his eyes. When the parchment fell off the curse, Geto sensed the difference immediately, but was quick to adjust to the threat level. He looked past his extended palm, past the bee suspended in midair, and saw Gojo. Gojo felt the shape of the new curse too, but his eyes remained closed. Geto had everything under control. "I was right to keep the vision about Suguru and the babies to myself. Someone must be trying to sabotage our training. If I told Suguru about what I saw, how real it seemed, it might have distracted him. He might have gotten as worked up about it as I was. Maybe." Geto saw that Gojo was preoccupied with his thoughts. Gojo was at his most vulnerable in this state. Infinity was off too. "It's my turn to have his back," Geto thought as he brought the bee curse closer to him. Geto kept it a few inches away from his palm and turned around, walking towards Yaga. The curse pulsed with rage that it couldn't lash out with its barbed tentacles. Geto hadn't lost control of it for even 1 second. He stopped in front of Yaga. "Time?" he asked quietly. Yaga looked at his stopwatch and held a finger up. Geto waited, amping up his cursed energy output as the curse's stability ebbed and flared. "Time," announced Yaga in a flat voice, pressing a button on his stopwatch. He couldn't help but smirk. Geto had changed tremendously since his hospitalization, but this quiet confidence, never bordering on smugness, was something he remembered from the old days. As Yaga subdued the bee curse and took down the safety barriers, Gojo and Geto regrouped near the doors of the training chamber. "Are you okay?" Geto asked. His simple question sounded loaded to Gojo. "Are you recovered from your breakdown? Are you feeling steady now? Are you going to tell me what's wrong?" But Gojo knew that was his own anxiety talking. He cuffed Geto gently on the back of his neck. "You were so good back there." As they walked back to the dorm, Gojo thought about how steady Geto had been in the training chamber, how Gojo's mind had wandered and Geto's control increased to make up for it. Geto's improvement was another sign that they were getting closer to what Gojo knew was going to be the hardest part of serving Jujutsu Society again, absorbing curses. He imperceptibly shook his head. Gojo couldn't stop himself from thinking of it. He let the vision of seeing Geto, peace written on his face, clothed in black robes, turning to smile at him, fled his mind. He still remembered looking down at the babies in his arms. Twins! He could feel their little soft bodies pressed into his chest. A sound escaped his throat, and without a second thought, he grabbed Geto's gloved hand and pressed it to his lips for a moment before letting go, gently. Geto was startled, but he didn't resist. When Gojo let go of his hand, Geto grabbed it again. "If they're going to make me put my life on the line to save people who don't give a shit about what sorcerers go through, at least let me have the freedom to hold my boyfriend's hand while I'm still alive to do so." Geto tipped his chin up in defiance, though the sidewalks were empty of people waiting to judge. Gojo felt the warmth and defiance all at once in Geto's grip. He squeezed his hand in return. "I'm starting to grow weary of a world where we can't ever know the true joys of life. I want you to have peace. I want those babies. I'm not letting go either, Suguru."